In the previous video on Scan, we looked at how the whole thing works, how all the different parts work together, how it's built from really a very simple relationship between time and complexity or uncertainty. What I want to do this time is to simplify it right down to just those two elements. The time before and after something happens, and the level of uncertainty and what we can do about that uncertainty. So this one's based on a fairly straightforward example of an operation, a surgical operation. Imagine someone's going for an operation on a cancer, let's say. So it's a slightly concerning issue, but let's have a look at how all the elements in that stack together. So if we draw that simple axis of time coming through to a now and then onwards into what will become after, it will become the after. So we're going from before to the now and then the after. And in the opposite direction, we've got a scale of uncertainty or complexity all the way out to complete uncertainty. We have no idea what's going on. So from certain to uncertain. And we'll start up here with the very beginning point of the whole thing, which is if the now is going to be the moment of being within the operation itself, then here is when the patient first comes in, and the first thing we want to capture is patient identity. And that's important because everything else comes from that. You don't want to do the operation on the wrong person. You don't want to do the wrong operation on that person. You've got to pin everything onto that. So that's really an absolutely core item. We've got to be certain about that. Now, as time goes on, straight after we've brought that person into the hospital, the next thing we want to check is patient condition. And we note that that's going to be changing all the way through. We're going to be concerned about that. That's likely to go to being more or less certain over time. And we're also going to have to be concerned about what the family are doing. We've got to, although the patient is the person we're working on, there are other stakeholders. In this case, there's a family. And we need to watch that. That's not something we can control at all. And for that, we're definitely going to need someone like, say, a chaplain to help us keep track of what's going on. Whereas something for the patient identity, the first thing we're likely to do is print a barcode bracelet. You could clip that on in a way that it's not going to come off. Then, having got that sorted out, we want to pin down a theatre booking. We want to have the operating theatre booked. That's another crucial thing because we need to know where it's going to happen. If you like, that's who, this is where, and this is related to what. This is a side issue that we want to be able to bring more certain than it is at the moment. Next thing on this, if we've got the theatre booking and the patient condition tracked, we now want to find out to develop a surgery plan. And that's going to be dependent on the patient condition. There's a dependent relationship here. There's also, given the surgery plan, we're now going to need an equipment plan. That too is a dependency. And we need to be very clear about those. We can't go into the theatre if we haven't got the right equipment, otherwise we're going to be putting the patient at risk. So we need to be certain about this. We know these are uncertain. We know that we don't have a clue what's going to happen here. Because one of the things that's likely to happen is we're likely to get pre-operation complications. And again, we really want to be able to pull those over as much as we can to make those more certain. But we know that we can't know beforehand. We've also got to check the surgical staff availability. Who's going to be available to do it? Because that can vary. We've got rosters, but it's a known unknown. As we get closer towards doing the operation, or the day or the morning of the operation, we're going to double verify the patient's identity. We've got the patient on the gurney. We now need to verify that this is verify the patient. It's the right one, and we've verified not just the patient identity and action. So if it was an operation on a leg, we might literally draw on that leg. And action. This must be known before we go into the surgery. And the next thing we're going to need to verify, usually with a checklist, is the consumables that we're going to use. We're going to need the right consumables with a margin for error, like blood packs and so on. Because what we don't want to have happen is those suddenly going uncertain on us. We need to keep track of what's going on. Now, another booby trap that can happen at the very last moment, we've got the patient ready, we've got the patient under anaesthetic, and then suddenly we've got a traffic emergency and it's all hands down to go and do an emergency. So every theatre gets booked in a hurry. And we have to boot our patient out of the theatre because someone else has an even higher priority than our patient does. Now that's another known unknown. We know it's a risk. We need a protocol in place to handle it. So we need to be clear what the safe last moment is before we can actually go into theatre, and when we close the theatre and say, you can't come in. So along with that, there's all kinds of emergency actions that might be needed. As we go into the operation itself, things can go wrong. And we don't know beforehand what they're going to be. A surgeon might nick the patient's aorta while trying to cut out a liver cancer, for example. That means you've got very serious emergency action. We also might have the family trying to barge in at the last moment, having realised it's a life-threatening injury, a life-threatening operation, and therefore we're going to need not so much a chaplain here, we're going to need security staff to stop them barging in. And as we go through the now of the operation, one thing that we're going to be building up all the time is action records, because we're going to need those to learn from the future. So what we're doing is we're trying to move things around, trying to make things more certain, build things that will help us anchor certainty in some way or another. But we can also see an important point here about, we can divide this quite simply, not just in terms of certainty, but of the tools we can use for certainty. Hence, for example, here we want IT. This is very much something that we want IT to do. The IT is going to be effectively doing the decision making. They're very simple decisions in most cases about identity, but they're essential decisions. Here we have protocols that deal with uncertainty, and the role of IT is IT decision support, not decision making. And over here, this is going to depend entirely on human skill. And the only role of IT is going to be real-time. IT provides real-time info, and that's it. So this is a simple example of how to plot something out using those two axes. It's a simple example of scan about the choices that we make, the kinds of tools that we can use and build for these kinds of purposes, how we make all of this work. Dealing with uncertainty, accepting uncertainty is an inherent fact of the context, rather than pretending that everything can be lumped into IT. So we look at those again. The quick summary, a quick overview, is that we've mapped out in time and in terms of uncertainty to help us build an understanding of what's going on. And we can partition it in terms of the tools that we can use and the kinds of decision making that has to be done. That's a useful role for Scan. Thanks for watching. Do look at the YouTube description for links to further detail. And don't forget to subscribe for other videos and also to support us on Patreon to help us produce these videos and the tools themselves.